Hey everyone, we are live. Sorry for the bit of a delay. I was selling something off of Facebook Marketplace, and that took longer than I expected. Or the people showed up later than I expected. But it is all good. Just checking the stream looks good over here. Looks good to me. So, let me know if there are any issues with sound. But, welcome to another Malts and Meeples live stream. And with this one, we're starting to play our way through Pandemic Legacy Season 2. I had to do a little bit of a refresher as to how to play this one, since it has been a while and it's not like picking up Pandemic Legacy Season 1, which is basically just picking up Pandemic, which is another reason this was a couple minutes later. So, haven't quite set up yet. There are technically a few things that I should be doing at this point in time that I will be doing for when I'm actually playing instead of just playing the prologue like I am now. That will be naming these characters that I have here and naming their starting locations. So I finish up shuffling. I'm playing two characters again, just because that seemed like it was going to be the simplest. And eventually these characters will have to kind of move off the board. But for the prologue, we aren't going to be spreading out that much, so I can show them to you. Otherwise, I'm probably going to have to be holding up cards, showing off those. So as I finish the setup here, basically what I'm doing, they have their starting hand of 4 cards, and then I have 5 pandemic cards that I need to mix in. And I'm just kind of doing a little bit of this housekeeping to show everything for this. Normally I will try and have it all set up ahead of time. So, shuffling these in. So there's a difference in this one, and I'll kind of touch on it here with the backstory. So at the end of Pandemic Legacy Season 1, we had stopped Coda, the virus. But, of course, that's not going to really be that interesting a story going forward, and you never know, a group might stop the virus, a group might not stop the virus. So the story for Season 2 is that 77 years ago, there was a virus, a man-made virus that took out the land. Now, this is not the one that we stopped. This is a different one. And goodness, I'm not really liking that much, am I? Sorry. It says it's dropping 56% of the frames. It doesn't seem. But a lot of time has passed, and the world has changed. We, the survivors, live not on the mainland, where the plague will still run amok But we live on these ocean bases. And from our ocean bases, we are trying to keep the lands from being completely run under. Though we only have contact with a few different areas. Those along the shore. Our goal is to try and keep these different areas alive. Keep them so that the plague, these cubes down here, doesn't outbreak into them. But before I get to actually playing the game, we have our malt for today. Hadn't forgotten about it. Today's malt is maroon and bold. Can't really tip it to show it to the main camera because that most definitely would spill across the whole board. So maroon and bold is IPA, or in this case a double dry hop double IPA from Bent Brewstillery. They're a local Roseville, I guess technically, so St. Paul area brewery, and they have connections with the University of Minnesota, so they get their hops, and they always do a maroon and bold to go with the University of Minnesota, known as maroon and gold. And yeah, it's different every year, but I've yet to have a miss in terms of their beers. Let me know if this is weird with how it's displaying. I'm hoping it isn't, but I can adjust some stuff for future streams if it is, or eventually get a more powerful computer that's better able to handle running the stream. I wonder, can I save myself a little bit of juice by doing that? Let me know if this... Okay, it is still streaming. Excellent. So, with Pandemic Legacy Season 2, we actually have a prologue. It's something that we're doing before we dig into the main story. So, prologue. Do not open the Legacy deck. Your characters can't get exposed. That means that if we're at a spot with a plague cube, normally we start scratching off one of these little spots down here to see if we get a scar, to see if we wind up dead, but we don't do that. We can't do recon. Recon is this over here, which tells us to open various packages if we do different things. So in the case of this one, it is 3 blue cards. Any 3 blue cards. This is any 5 unique yellow cards. So it varies depending on which one you're doing. We don't get to do the game end steps. Can't do system-wide production. If that comes up on a card, I'll show you. And we can really play it as many times as we want. Basically, we're trying to build 2 supply centers. We have a journal entry as well. Priorities. We need to complete the following mandatory objective. build 3 supply centers. We've barely got our heads around this mess. And yet now, we find ourselves in charge. We're covering ourselves up and heading out on supply runs to see the front lines and gauge how bad things are. Things are going to get real very soon. The Hollow Men will tear down our supply centers almost as soon as we build them, but we've got to start restoring our presence on the mainland. Keep journal entries like this in the reserve in case you want to reference them in the future. So the reserve is basically just the box. So let's jump into the game. First thing that I have yet to do is I have to take 9 of the infection deck cards, and so this is where it really differs for this game. In regular Pandemic, you are putting cubes on that are bad. Here we have gray cubes, our supplies, on all these locations, and these are what we're using to prevent and fight back against the plague. And instead of putting them on, we're taking them off. Solve all those down to 1. And if we ever have to take off a cube and it isn't there, then we get a plague cube. And putting out plague cubes advances our incident tracker. And that's one of the ways you can lose the game. Obviously, you can still draw, and if you don't have any cards to draw, you lose the game. Or, I believe, well, those are going to be the 2 ways we can lose the game right now. So we're going to start with this character up here, which is represented by this marker. She's going to use her rationed event. This event says, take 2 supply cubes from the stockpile and put them on any location. That's great because Sao Paulo needed some, and you'll notice that the board moves. That is because I am not sure when the last time there was a new print run of Pandemic Legacy Season 2 was, so this has been sitting in a box probably for quite a while. So what we're looking to do right now is build 3 supply centers. We have our instructor, who once per turn as an action can give one player a card to a player at your location. And we have the administrator. Once on your turn as an action, you may move a pawn to any other pawn. She's going to move up there for 1 action. Pass off Lagos. And otherwise, they have to be in the correct location to trade. So she's going to end up here in Istanbul, hoping to get this Istanbul card back. We flip 2. She's gotten Cairo, which gets her 2 away, and produce supplies. So this is where we have the system-wide thing as well. So the bottom half basically produces a supply everywhere, and that's not something we can do in the prologue. mainly because those cards are a limited resource, and the prologue's just really meant to teach you how to play. So she's finished her turn, drawn her 2 cards, and then we flip to London and Washington. From the infection deck. We're going to go 1, 2 with him over here. Pass off Istanbul. It's going to produce a supply. And then actually send her back this way. So there is no line available to connect London and Istanbul currently. And this is something that's going to come up in the future in the game. So wonderfully happy. He's gotten Tripoli, and we've gotten our first epidemic. Epidemic, we move this forward. We draw the bottom card of the infection deck and remove all the supply cubes from that city, Istanbul. Shuffle the cards of the infection deck, and then we go about the rest of the infection phase as normal. So we get 2 of these. So Sao Paulo and Jacksonville. Right now he's not in a great spot. So it's going to be advantageous for her to probably create 2 supplies, move back here, and deliver supplies. So she can create 1 supply as an action. So that's 2 actions to create 2 supplies. Then she walked for another one. But when dropping off supplies, you can drop off as many as you want at one time. Think about it as, any sort of delivery type service where they're making their own product. It takes, say, a day to make a chair. So if you want to make 6 chairs, it's going to take 6 days. But to deliver 6 chairs, you can fit all of those in a pickup truck and do that in 1 day. That's basically how that's working. Now, it wasn't a big deal necessarily for me to have done this right now in the prologue, since he can't get exposed. But, as we continue here, she has Lagos and Tripoli. And let me double check one thing here. Hand limit is 7 cards. She's at 8. We're actually just going to discard the... No, she is at 7. So next turn, she's going to be able to build us a supply center. Next, it's his turn. Oh, first things first. New York and London both lose 1. So he has 1 on him. 1, 2, 3. And he can deploy for 4. Not super useful, but right now we're mainly searching for yellow cards. We have enough of the black cards to complete a supply center. So London loses 1, and Sao Paulo So on her turn, she can spend all 5 of her cards. And that's going to get a supply center built where she's at. Now she has to discard black cards for a black location to be able to build the supply center. So that was action 1. 2. 3. She'll produce a supply. Since she has the ability to trade with him just naturally anywhere, I just want them to be close enough when the time comes. Alright, so grabbing 2, have another produce supplies, and another yellow card. So right now it looks like we might be getting 2 supply centers in yellow. Then we do the flip of 2, Washington and Istanbul. So Istanbul loses 1, Washington loses 1. It's his turn. He can't grab either of the yellows from her because she's not at a yellow location matching either Lagos or Jacksonville. I thought about moving her to one of them, but it just wasn't worth it at that point in time. So instead, we're going to have him produce 1 and drop 1. Ooh. No, we're not. I'm going to have him go 1, free action, take it from her. 2, 3 to Jacksonville, and drop 1 off there. The reason for doing that is now he's set up with a yellow. He does have to discard 1. And an epidemic. Epidemic in London. We advance that as well. London loses its supply. We shuffle. Do we not have audio? Have I been doing this whole thing sans audio? Because I just saw it says the audio bitrate is non-existent. Sorry. Nope, looks like we do. So I can also keep an eye on it over here. Stream health is excellent. Okay. So it must be good. Maybe there was a slight hiccup in there at some point in time. So I've shuffled up the ones that were on top, and we have London, London. London gets 2 plague cubes. So to deal with the plague cube, yay! Reconnection successful. I have no idea why it bombed out there for half a second, but it did. Always the best. Always the best. Okay, so Anyways, back to where I was. London now has 2 plague cubes. Basically, what that means is that in a regular game, if you were to start a turn in London, because there are plague cubes, you would have to scratch off an exposure. In the prologue, you don't have to do that. So we have our character... Oh, and that advanced the incident marker by 2. 1 for each cube. So, what I could do, I think what I'm going to do, for demonstration purposes, is I'm going to have her create a supply, come over here for 1, drop off a supply, and then go back over here. Basically, by doing that, I've bought myself a London card. Like, I can add supplies to a spot where there is plague still. And, man, apparently we're going to build 2 in yellow. At least that's what it's looking like. So we take 2, we get Jacksonville and London. So Jacksonville loses 1, and because I put 1 in London, it loses a gray cube as well. I have to read you a description of this beer very quickly. The original Minnesota double infuriatingly passive-aggressive ale. It is wonderful. So wonderful. Also, if my hair seems long, I have not had a haircut since March. That is more just me being lazy, not getting one scheduled than anything. I am normally the drop-in type. So, first action, we're building a supply center in Jacksonville. Second action, producing. Third action, producing. Fourth action, drop in Jacksonville. So, what it looks like we want to do is head towards Sao Paulo. I have a Sao Paulo card that he can trade to her if they're in Sao Paulo. Though Sao Paulo's not quite the place you want to be. And I'm going to lean into the fact that this is the prologue. This is not super story heavy driven thing. This is, here's how to play the game. So we're going to kind of show how not to play the game while showing off some of the fundamentals of the game. And I had Istanbul and Washington there. So on her turn, producing 1, 2. So this was production would have been 3. We're going to put 1 there. Gets to draw 2. Can hold to 1 of them. It's not worth it for her to keep any black cards. We have the 4 yellow cards. We need 5, so we're just kind of searching for that last one, and we're 1 away. It's going to happen fast. So Cairo and New York. His turn. 1, 2. Trade a card for 3. We're going to actually send her back out to sea. The reason for that is she's now more centrally located, because we need to get something back on Istanbul and New York. Now, if we look at this, for the actions that I can take, I can move along a connected line. If it's a seaport, I can discard a card of the city I want to go to. Or I can discard the card of the city I'm in to go to another seaport. Eventually, I believe, we're able to fly between supply centers, but that's not something we can do yet. So that this version of Pandemic, the movement is much slower. So he's completed his turn, drawing 2 cards. Well, we're getting close on blue as well. So I think what's going to actually happen is coming down here for 1. Pass off that blue card, which I'd have had to have discarded a card for her anyways. So now I'm 1 blue and 1 yellow short. And then go 1, 2, draw 2. Hey, there's that last blue card I need. And discard 1. Flipping 2 here. Sao Paulo and Jacksonville. So odds are there's going to be an epidemic in the next few cards. I'm going to produce, and then just move here. Gives me a nice centralized location. I've covered Sao Paulo. Draw my 2, looking for a blue, blue and blue. I am very well set. There, now it's just a matter of surviving. New York gets 1. So this is actually really nice. I had forgotten to move it down for Sao Paulo, but it's obvious that I should have because I can count the number of plague cubes. And Cairo loses 1. So we're getting down there. An epidemic might cause this to go awry. So I think we need to consider what to cover here. 1, 2. I'm going to pick up all 4 supplies. I'm going to pick up 3 supplies, which is a free action for her to take. 1, 2, 3, and put them all down. To go back to my analogy, these supply crates are already built chairs, so it's easy enough to move a chair around. So she's drawing 2, Istanbul, and an epidemic. And Istanbul, which has nothing on it, would, in this case, nothing actually happens. So the infect phase says draw the bottom card and remove all the supply cubes, if there are any, from that city. Discard that card. Sorry, that is backwards. The interesting thing about that, and I possibly have just messed up how I've been doing that for a while, is that there wasn't actually any negative for me there, because it already had 0. Removing them caused nothing to happen. However, now Istanbul gets 1 there. And Sao Paulo, nope, and I'm at 3 now, gets 1 there. And finally, Sao Paulo has another removed. But we have 5 blue cards, so 1, 2 to Washington. Let's do this like I would in a real game, actually. It was here, 1, 2 to London, and I'm going to discard all 5 blue cards to build a supply center, and then that completes it for me. So this is just the prologue at this point. The game itself has a whole lot more going on to it. Right now, the thing that I didn't do that I could have done had I been playing the actual game is doing these recon actions that are some, I mean, legitimately some are not possible right now. So let me just pull everything back from here since we don't get any of the end bonuses, just for you to see what I mean here. We have 1, 2, 3 different blue cities. We just need 3 blue cards to complete this one, but this needs 4 different blue cities to open it, and you need a card from you need cards from 4 different blue cities. So that's something we can't even do yet. Same with this one over here, out of Cairo, and this one here. And the other thing with recon is that there must be a supply center there for you to be able to do it. So let's say I wanted to recon here in Washington. It doesn't just take 3 blue cards. I need a supply center here, which is going to have already taken 5 blue cards. So to be able to do that, I'm going to have done a grand total of 8 blue cards. Which, I mean, we'd seen 9 yellow cards at this point, so we could have explored here in Sao Paulo had we wanted to. The other thing, there are more things you can do, but right now we just have a very small, tight little map. Because we're in the prologue, and you can't see it here, so I'll point it out down here. Like, you have varying numbers of supply cubes you place at the start. In September it's 12, October 8, November 4, December 0. So the further you get into the game, the less you're adding to your supply. But honestly, the prologue's not that exciting. The rest of the game is much more interesting, as I haven't even broken the seal on this Pandemic, the Legacy deck. Also, I do have, though I'm not going to be streaming this immediately following, Pandemic Legacy Season 0. So this one just came out. I believe it is the 3rd and final Pandemic Legacy that is going to be coming out. Season 0 means that it is taking place before Season 1. If you wanted to play through them, from what I've heard, it's best probably playing 1, then 0, then 2, in terms of kind of how information is disseminated. But this one is very different in that it spies in the Cold War versus dealing as much with a disease. But it does, or it's supposed to, tie in to the whole of the campaign. Anyways, with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this, that it was informative. This gave you a general idea of how to play the game. I'm not here to get all the rules perfectly correct, and in fact I know that I won't, but hopefully it was enough to help you to know if you'd be interested in this game. I am going to play through the whole campaign of it, up to 24 games. So this is going to be what I'm going to be streaming for a while on Wednesdays. I hope that it is interesting as I do this, and hopefully it is a lot of fun. But with that, bottoms up.